Hello, welcome to Design Shing. In this video, Erin and I are undertaking a massive project, a built-in entertainment center right on this wall in the living room. Right now, the television is sitting catty corner in the living room. And when I first moved in, that felt like the only place to locate it because there's a big stone fireplace in the center of the living room, and the fireplace unit itself is located a bit too high to actually mount the television over it for a good, comfortable viewing angle. So to be honest, I've never really liked the TV in the corner. I'm not a huge fan of catty cornering furniture. I think it can look nice with a full wall built in, but we've got a through-wall AC unit on that wall behind the TV, and it just looks really clunky with all the geometries clashing back there. Another issue with the current location of the television is that it's actually rather far from the seating area. So it's a 50-inch TV, which is really the biggest size we can fit in that corner, but it also feels like the smallest size to comfortably view from the couch that far away. Also, Aaron plays Xbox when he is playing a battle game, I guess, like Mortal Kombat that requires a wire controller. He's sitting on the edge of the sectional and creating a lovely tripping hazard in the living room. The setup we have now is fine. It totally works. But the small challenges and inconveniences we've had both Aaron and me brainstorming a new solution. So interestingly, it was actually my idea. I wanted a big screen TV. We're talking 75 inches, like obnoxiously large. As soon as I tossed the idea of a big screen TV to Aaron, he was all over it. And then it was time to introduce part 2 of the master plan, because we couldn't just buy a giant TV with nowhere to put it. I digitally modeled our living room and the furniture, and Erin and I devised a new layout for our space. The plan is to flip the layout of the living room. This sectional will go in front of the fireplace. We never turn that fireplace on, so we're not worried about obstructing it a little. Luckily, this is a reversible sectional, so we can mirror it and still keep the LPs on the side with the window wall. In this day and age, the interior design trend is to purchase a frame TV and disguise it on the wall as artwork. We are not doing that. The television will not hide inconspicuously in a gallery wall, but stand loud and proud, announcing itself as what it is, a giant television. On the wall opposite of the fireplace and behind me right now, we are going to build an entertainment center to house our giant new toy, as well as display our personal libraries. The Billy Bookcase built-in IKEA hack, I hate the word hack, is widely popular because Billy Bookcases are inexpensive, and using a standardized unit saves time when filling a wall with bookshelves. There are a lot of great tutorials out there on how to make your IKEA bookcases look built in, and my personal favorite is by Mandy Makes on the A Beautiful Mess blog. She has incredible craft and really transforms the Billy Bookcases so they truly look like built-ins. Since this is an entertainment center, we're going to need a TV stand. When you're mounting or placing a television, you want the middle of the screen to be at eye level, which is typically around 42 inches above finished floor, depending on the height of your seating. Since we're getting a 75-inch television, the stand actually needs to be lower to the ground to maintain that 42 inches to center. In order to incorporate the TV stand into the entertainment center, we're actually going to be incorporating pieces from 2 different IKEA lines. For the TV stand itself, we've chosen the 15-inch Besta TV unit centered between 2 15-inch Besta frames. The Besta line is designed as an entertainment center, and it actually has a 24-inch Besta bookcase in the line. However, the Besta bookcase is a lot more expensive than the Billy Bookcase, which is why we chose this hybrid route. Of course, we want this to look like one monolithic piece, so we'll be building a plinth or a base to unify the units. Now, on either side of the Besta TV stand, there will be 3 15 3/4-inch Billy bookcases. Also installing the Billy bookcases upside down so that the toe kick will pass the crown molding. To bridge between the bookcases and frame the TV, we'll be adding our own shelves and dividers. To further provide visual unity, we will add trim to cover the double edges between the bookcases, and we will trim out that toe kick that's at the ceiling. One color that Aaron and I have a mutual love for is emerald green. We wanted to paint the bookcase a deep emerald green, which is not so dark it renders black, but not so saturated that it looks like a leprechaun lives here. I knew for this built-in we wanted to use high quality paint, and since we're painting furniture, we opted for Sherwin-Williams urethane trim enamel. To select our perfect green, we went to Sherwin-Williams and grabbed a bunch of paint chips. We then pinned the paint chips up on the wall to check it at all hours of the day, all angles, all lighting configurations, both to land unanimously on Shamrock green, which sounds very much like that leprechaun color we were trying to avoid. The hard part wasn't agreeing on a color, it was agreeing on a sheen. Aaron fought hard for semi-gloss, but I pushed for satin because I was worried with the flashing or unevenness with the paint sheen, and satin is a lot more forgiving when it comes to imperfections. Now, if we were homeowners, we would definitely go back to the paint store, get sample cans, and paint a sample onto the wall before going all out and buying gallons of a paint. However, since we're renters and this is ultimately temporary, we felt comfortable going ahead and ordering the paint without doing a test swatch. This is a risk that we were willing to take with our personal project. This was a huge project, and because my work area was small, I could only paint a few pieces at a time. I chose to paint all of the IKEA pieces disassembled because it's a lot easier to paint a flat panel than an assembled bookcase. I started by painting the IKEA Besta units because this would be the first element of our built-in, partly because they're in the center and on the bottom, but also because we just bought a giant honking television and we needed a place to put it. So to get started, I removed all of the Besta pieces from the box, setting aside hardware for later. The Besta units are laminate, which is a material that is notoriously resistant to paint. I used an orbital sander with 220 grit sandpaper to lightly scuff the surface of each piece to help the paint adhere better. While the paint color is the fun part, it's very important not to overlook the primer. We are painting laminate furniture, which is notoriously resistant to paint. A great primer is critical to a great looking paint job. I went with the Zinsser Bonds Adhesion Primer, which is a water-based, urethane modified acrylic primer to help bond the paint to the laminate. For all of the laminate pieces, I applied one coat of primer to each side that would receive a color coat. After the primer coat had dried, it was time for the green. I won't lie, the green paint was rendering very leprechaun when we first opened it. It made me nervous. However, I was relieved to find that the paint dried a much darker color than straight out of the can. Before installing the Besta units in our living room, we wanted to build a continuous platform to unify the three different base components. I purchased the wood from my local lumber store, Anderson Plywood. I went in with my cutlass and had them cut everything to size. For a project like this, I highly recommend utilizing your local lumber store because they can make sure that you choose the right material for your project and also help you optimize the cuts on your plywood sheets. Before I assembled anything, I sanded all of my boards for a smooth, snag-free finish. To build the platform, I first created a frame out of 2x2s. This was the size of wood that I needed to achieve our desired height with the Besta units, but you could sub this out with whatever fits your dimensional needs. Then I attached 1/2-inch plywood to the top of the base. This will give our three different IKEA pieces a single surface to sit on. After building the platform, it was finally time to install our IKEA TV base and get that giant television off of the floor. Now remember, we wanted the bookcases on either side of the TV unit to span from floor to ceiling. The Billy Bookcase is only 79.5 inches tall. While IKEA does have an an extension piece that they sell to increase the height of the bookcase to 93¼ inches, we instead opted to build our own cubbies for the base. The goal here is to create a continuous, unified base that blends in and carries the vertical motif of the TV stand. I started by building a platform to get the inside of the cubby base to align perfectly adjacent with the inside of the Besta TV unit. Something that is very important to our design is that the level of the TV stand is equal to the level of the book stand. I know where I made the mistake. When I was drafting the TV stand base, I used the actual dimension of 1.5 by 1.5 for a nominal 2x2, when the actual dimension of the 2x2 that I bought was 1 3/4 by 1 3/4, so we were just 1/4 inch off. That's okay, easy fix. I went back to the hardware store, I purchased 1/4 inch plywood, and we're just going to set it on top of the base that we've already built, attach that to the bottom. So now you'll see that we have a level TV stand base and bookshelf base. One straight line all the way across. Since I had all of my plywood pieces cut to size at the lumber store, I only had to worry about attaching the pieces to the base and each other. Loaded bookcases full of books are going to be sitting on these plywood cubby bases. I wanted them to be very sturdy. I used a Kreg jig to drill pocket holes in the vertical panels. A pocket hole is a much stronger connection than end-grain joinery, and with the jig, they're very easy to make. With the help of my right angle clamp and also my clamp guy, Aaron, I use pocket hole screws to fasten the vertical panels to the base and the top. Prior to painting, I filled the screw holes with wood putty, waited for it to dry, and then sanded smooth. Then it was time to prime. For the plywood pieces, I was less concerned about adhesion and more concerned with stain blocking and sealing. I used Zinsser Bullseye Primer 123, which is a water-based acrylic primer sealer, to prime the wood pieces. The plywood cubbies are the only pieces I painted while they were assembled. This is because it would have been difficult to paint disassembled and still hide the screw holes. Not to mention, after I built them, I did not want to take them back apart. The overall duration of time it took to paint was probably shortened since I painted them assembled and didn't have to worry about flipping sides. However, I'd argue that I actually spent much more time painting the assembled cubbies, while with the disassembled IKEA pieces, I spent more time waiting for each side to dry before I could paint the next. The other caveat with painting assembled is that it was a lot more challenging to deal with corners. I started by cutting into the corners with a paintbrush, but I just couldn't get that consistent roller smooth finish that I was able to achieve with the unassembled IKEA pieces. We have an electrical receptacle on the wall behind the cubbies, which we need to maintain access to. We also need to be able to feed cords into the cubby because this is where the surge protector is going to live. And so I have used a jigsaw to cut out some holes for the electrical receptacle, as well as a hole in the corner that we are going to feed the cords through. This is actually the second time that I have made this back panel, because the first time I made it, I used 1/4 inch ply, and when I went in with the jigsaw to cut out the square for the outlet, I ended up ripping off a lot of veneer to the ply, and it just didn't look very good. So take two, I use 1/4 inch MDF, which is a lot smoother and easier to cut with the jigsaw since it doesn't have a direction of grain like the plywood does. So if you need to be cutting, holes in the middle of something, consider MDF for smoother hole cutting. I've already run two 50-foot Ethernet cables to both the Xbox and the television all the way across the room where the internet modem lives. I just use coaxial cable clips to attach the Ethernet cord just above the baseboard. I also left several spare feet of cord on this side of the wall so that we'll be able to move the devices up and down or around if we need. My next step will be to mount the surge protector on the inside of the cubbies, and this will not only keep it secure and out of the way, but also it'll help it from getting dust into the outlet holes. Most surge protectors have little grooves on the back so that you can use a screw to fit in here and secure it and mount it to the wall. I'm then going to attach the back panel to the back of the cubbies. The surge protector is over here, and the cord goes under and behind this back panel, and then it plugs in over here. So we have a hole and we can access the outlet so that we can unplug this if necessary. However, we wanted to make sure that there wasn't just like a big hole in the middle of our back panel. And so the solution is an access panel. And this is just like a switch plate cover, but with no holes in it for a receptacle or a switch. Today I'm going to be prepping the Billy bookcases to be painted. Because we already built a platform for our bookcases to be installed on top of, the bookcases are actually just a little bit too tall. To get us the clearance we need, I'm going to be cutting off an inch from what would be the bottom of the Billy bookcase, but for us, because we're installing it upside down, it will be the top. I'm also cutting off at a 45-degree angle where the toe kick begins because we've got protrusive crown molding at the top of the ceiling. I'm going to be making a rough cut, which means it's not the final finish cut. And this is a pretty low stakes kind of cut to make. To do this, I'm going to be using a jigsaw. Because this is just a rough cut that I'm going to be covering with trim, I am just going to freehand it with the jigsaw. I then lightly sanded the Billy bookcase pieces, then wiped away the dust using a tack cloth before priming and painting. Now while we're waiting for paint to dry, let's move on to the next component of our giant entertainment center wall, the television cubby. To break up the monotony of the green and provide a softness to our massive built-in wall, Aaron and I decided to wallpaper the area behind the television. Aaron immediately suggested a large-scale black and white floral print wallpaper that he had spotted in a photo of a bathroom on my Pinterest board. But wanting to be certain of our decision, we decided to digitally try on an absurd number of wallpaper alternatives. Nothing too geometric, something organic, nothing too dark, nothing too busy. After an exhausting trip to the digital dressing room, also known as Photoshop, Aaron and I finally landed emphatically on the perfect wallpaper. The black and white large-scale floral print that Aaron saw in a photo of a bathroom on my Pinterest board. This removable wallpaper is actually a mural by a brand called Unique Stick. It came in 4 25-inch panels to complete a mural that is 100 inches by 100 inches. The mural pattern repeats, so if you need to cover a larger area, you could buy multiple murals, but for us, a single mural worked perfectly. Now, I've installed my fair share of removable wallpaper, and I must say, this is the highest quality wallpaper that I have installed to date. The vinyl is very thick and not too stretchy. It was a little challenging for my short arms to handle the wide 25-inch panels, but Aaron came in to help. Aaron also assisted with meticulously lining up the pattern. We chose to slightly overlap the panels because when I installed navy peel and stick wallpaper with no overlap in my entryway, I noticed that later the vinyl paper contracted, leaving a tiny sliver of white. If you want a detailed step-by-step on how to install peel and stick removable wallpaper, check out my entryway makeover video. Since the wall mural was only 4 panels, it was very fast and simple to install. But after it was on the wall, we were faced with a big conundrum. How can we cover up this gorgeous floral wallpaper with Cubbies? Originally, we had planned to bridge Cubbies over the TV to connect the 2 bookcases, but after installing the wallpaper, we no longer felt like this was the correct decision. So we decided to delete the over TV Cubbies and perhaps refine the design so that we can show some more wallpaper. Due to my laydown area being limited to the size of a parking space, it took me weeks to paint all of the components. But finally, it was time to put everything together and secure it to the wall. Securing the bookcases to the wall is a critical part of this project. Make sure that you anchor your bookcases to the wall so they can't be shaken down in the event of an earthquake or topple with disastrous consequences in the event that a small child attempts to scale them like a rock wall. To secure the bookcases to the wall, we use the brackets included with the Billy Bookcases, but we use screws with drywall anchors rather than the screws that were included in the packaging. In a set of 3, we started by anchoring the bookcase closest to the television at the top and at the center. We then lifted the middle bookcase and the outer bookcase into place. After determining the location of the outer bookcase, we removed the middle bookcase and anchored the outer to the wall. We then added the middle bookcase back and secured it to the adjacent bookcases. It's time for one of the final yet most important steps, and that's adding the trim. The trim is going to make it look like it's not just individual pieces all stacked together, but instead one cohesive unit. I went to the Home Depot. I found this hobby board, which is poplar, a 1/4 inch deep by 1.5. Using a miter saw, I cut the trim pieces to fit. I attached the trim to the bookcase using a brad nailer. I opted to only nail the trim onto the center bookcase, so whenever the day comes that we take this apart, we should be able to wiggle the middle bookcase free without having to rip off all of the trim pieces. One of the most challenging parts of trimming probably is figuring out how to wrap the edges. Since I wanted to have the same thickness of this vertical as the other verticals, I needed to have an extra 3/4 inch piece of trim behind it to kind of wrap that edge. Now, at the top, I'm going to need to push out the top trim that dies into the crown. So to do this, I am going to attach a 1/2 inch board behind my trim piece, and that way it'll sit out and be even with this trim as it wraps. Another key to making this bookcase look built in was coping the trim to the wall around the existing baseboard and crown. To do this, I used a metal compass to trace the baseboard onto a piece of mat board. I then used an X-Acto knife to cut along the baseboard outline. Making a template allowed me to test the fit and make adjustments before cutting into the trim material. After I was happy with the fit, I traced the template onto the base trim. I used a jigsaw to cut the baseboard outline from the trim piece. Since this had tight curves, I just removed a little bit of material at a time, rather than attempting to cut it all out in one straight shot. Now that the trim is all up, I am going to prep it for painting. First, filling in the joints between 2 separate pieces, painter's acrylic latex caulk. This is not silicone caulk. Very important that you do not use silicone caulk. Make sure you read the label. To do this, I'm just going to load it up in the caulking gun and smear it over the seams between 2 pieces. Now, to fill the holes that were left by the nail gun, I'm going to be using wood filler. Swipe it on with a putty knife, and then after it's dry, sand it down real smooth so that you can't see the holes where the nails entered. Once again, it was time to prime and paint. Also, if you were wondering, Aaron approved me painting around his Xbox. I covered it with plastic wrap just to be safe. I used a brush to get into the more detailed areas, but for the most part, I used a 4-inch high-density foam roller, which I found worked the best to get a smooth finish. Finally, it was the moment we had been waiting for. Time to populate the bookcase. Personally, I like to organize books by color. Bookshelf organization can be a surprisingly controversial topic. So, if you prefer to organize your books alphabetically by topic, or perhaps utilize the Dewey Decimal System, please let me know in the comments below. We opted for a warm side and a cool side, with red, pink, orange, yellow on the left and green, blue, purple on the right. Then for the neutrals, the brighter whites and tans went to the left and the grays and blacks went to the right. Aaron and I are both so happy with how the entertainment center turned out. The green is just the shade we wanted. The black and white floral wallpaper looks amazing behind the television. And now our book collection is on display and easy to access, and there's still room for more. You may be wondering about the location of Aaron's Xbox. Typically, these are shown underneath the television. However, Aaron opted to locate it higher so that he doesn't have to bend down to insert a disc. This project took longer than anticipated. I started in January and we populated the bookcases in April. However, I still had some last-minute trim that I finished in June. And now, to bring it all full circle, there is once again a Christmas tree in our living room. I hope you enjoyed this project. Please let me know what you think in the comment section below. I am more than happy to answer any questions you may have if you want to try something like this yourself. This project took me a lot of time between actually building it and then making the video explaining the steps, so I have a lot of knowledge that I am happy to share with you. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time with my next crazy over the top DIY project.